Hi, in this CBT Techniques Made Simple video, we're going to be covering the technique of weighing the evidence. Now, weighing the evidence is a hallmark of cognitive behavioral therapy. It's the bedrock of a lot of the interventions that we use implicitly. Here, we're going to be using the technique explicitly in helping your clients. There's going to be a progression here of building this into a couple of the other different techniques that we've already covered in the series. So weighing the evidence is really building up from defining our terms, being as exacting as we can in defining those terms, so we can make those into a preposition as opposed to an oppressive thought or feeling, something that can be discussed and analyzed as opposed to being hit with like a sledgehammer. Building up from there, we're looking at trying to integrate also making reasonable predictions in what we're discussing, and finally this is going to culminate in this technique, weighing the evidence. So what's the goal here in using this technique, weighing the evidence? Well, we're going to be using this technique for two different purposes, generally speaking. The first is when we're encountering schemas, these fundamental beliefs people have about themselves. I'm worthless, life is meaningful, there's no use trying, things of that sort. I'm unlovable. And the second is what ifs. We as people, we're a bit of time travelers, psychologically speaking, and we often will either zip to the past or we'll jump to the future. We're ruminating in past failures and regrets that we have, and we're living in the future of worries and what could be. So those are going to be the what ifs. The people that are psychologically living in the future, coming in with a lot of concerns. What if this? What if that? This technique is quite useful in addressing both those issues. Now, in using this approach, I would suggest pulling out your pad of paper, using a whiteboard. You want to try and get involved your client's different senses, not just listening, not just speaking, but also seeing. That the more senses you're able to bring in on any intervention is going to only increase its potency. So once you got the pad of paper out here, like I said, this technique is integrating two previous skills that we've developed. So the first here is defining our terms. Once we have specifically what we're going to be discussing down, precisely something that can be analyzed, then we're going to move on into weighing up the evidence. So step one here is listing the evidence for and against the belief. So say we've defined the terms that I am worthless. We've refined that particular term. What does it mean to be worthless? Well, being worthless is going to be not making enough money. Because of a lack of education, let's say, the person is simply not making the money that he wants and not supporting his family. So fundamentally, it's this I am worthless is zeroing in on I am not providing for my family in the way I ought to. That would be the preposition. So we're going to list off the evidence here, for and against. Are you providing for your family to your best ability, or are you not providing for your family to the best ability that you can? Here you're going to have to make a choice here. Which do you want to start with? Which side of the equation? And there's pluses and minuses in where you start. If you start with the cons, disproving that the person is not fundamentally being there for his family, well, there you stand the chance of blunting all the evidence that would be in support of this schema. And that could be useful. Getting a quick gain in treatment is one hallmark of CBT, trying to make things easier as best you can. Generally speaking, with this approach of therapy, we're not trying to dive in to the contents, the deep histories of people, unless we have to, and there are definitely skills and techniques that CBT has developed to be able to do this deeper work. But fundamentally, CBT is trying to keep things on a surface level analysis, like I said, to try and generate the biggest possible gains as quickly as we can, and that quite often is enough to change a person's life around. So that could be one judgment call you make here. Secondarily, you may actually decide, hey, listen, the sort of client that I have, that's not going to work. I'm not going to be blunting any evidence that's going to be against this idea. In fact, it's only going to encourage things worse. The person's going to be so much in their head, ruminating about all the reasons that they have for why they're not providing for their family in the way that they ought to, that any evidence that you bring along with the client that would challenge this idea is simply not going to be heard. So we gotta clean up the clutter in your client's head here. And what we're going to do is, if we're going to make that judgment call, you're going to focus first on all the evidence that would support this schema. You're on the risk of the client becoming more emotionally dysregulated. That's a risk you might have to take, but that's okay. Because it may very well be, just in terms of the person's cognitive processing limits here, that they may very well, quite likely, not be able to hold two thoughts in their head. What they want to say, proving the schema, and you disproving it. So that may very well be a good call to make on that end. So that's the first step. We're creating a list. We got 2 columns, evidence for, evidence against. Now, a little asterisk, a step number 2, little asterisk on this though, is you have to be discriminating in what you're going to allow on this list. Quite often people are going to be putting things on a list that have no relevance to their life whatsoever. So in the case we're dealing with here, it may very well be that your client is going to put on the list of just how horrible the world is, how different industries are going under. And these may affect your client, but you have to be careful. Are we going into, are we slipping into just general nihilism that lacks the unique connection to your client? Are we just loading on boulders of problems here? So you have to be careful with that. It has to be that whatever is going on this list of evidence is specifically connected to your client. It affects them intimately. Yeah, the why people do this, there's a lot of different reasons. One idea that might be useful in your work, that people worry about bigger problems that don't intimately connect with their life, is this may very well be an avoidance strategy for how bad they feel. Piaget, in his later stages, is not so often discussed, in his stages of development, say that quite often people in their individuation process will go through a messianic stage where they are, trying to solidify their personal beliefs and what they want to stand for. And at this stage, with a lot of people, things can get a little, the wires can get twisted here, where it just ends up being useless nihilism. Maybe it's being used as a way of making the person feel better that they care about big issues. But by caring about these big issues, they're really avoiding the problems that are in their life directly. So little messianic life development stage gone haywire, used as an avoidance strategy as opposed to striving for one's ideals. So that's a step 2 asterisk to step 1. Only things that are relevant to the client personally. So step 3 here is what we're going to do is we're going to give rankings to everything on the list. How influential is evidence 1, 2, and 3? How, on the pros side and the con side. You're wanting to give a numerical value to everything that goes on the list. It's not enough to have an idea. Quite often with the client, the problem is the fact, well, they have all these things on their list of evidence, but the quality is not assessed. A lot of the pieces of evidence are just not going to be so great when it comes to supporting the maladaptive schema. And quite often, the evidence that's against the maladaptive schema is going to be really good. So putting numbers to that demonstrates to the client the quality of evidence and helps them discriminate between what's making them feel bad, not being so valuable, not being so significant, and what can make them feel good, being amazing for their overall mental health. So step 4 here is going to be adding up all the different scores that we have that you've listed off, getting a general percentage. Is the evidence against the schema 80%, for it, 20%. Again, just an overall view of things. And then finally, step 5 is you want to wrap this up with a take-home message, some sort of narrative. We don't want this to only be numbers. We want this to act. So there are two main problems that you might run into using this particular technique. The first problem is it just won't do it. It won't hit the mark. It won't be emotionally significant. The person's going to look at you and say, okay, well, that's nice. This happens. When you hit a wall like this, you see that it's not necessarily predominantly a cognitive issue as much as being emotionally motivated. And here you're going to want to slip into other techniques that are focusing on emotion-based reasoning. So I would suggest something like guided imagery or role-playing would be suitable in a situation like that. Problem number 2 that comes up is the client just might feel criticized. That, here they have this problem, here they have this belief, and all you're doing is saying it ain't true. This can be very hard. And so you're going to have to rely on the therapeutic alliance, take it slow, reorient the client to what the work is, that you're not here to prove their life is one way or another, but you're trying to give them a tool that they can use to more slowly assess what the issue is. And more to the point also, hopefully in the work that you've done with this client, you've already laid the groundwork for identifying what the flavor of issues the client is coming in with, and merely point at those issues saying, listen, we know that we have a history here of thinking that is very dark, that is very painful, and while the world is full of issues, that's true, this may very well not be that. This may very well be the issues that you're coming in wanting to treat. So I totally hear your point. Let's explore this. Let's see what's going on here and if there can be some movement. But again, I'm not here to prove you wrong. This is your life, and I'm here to try and help in any way that I can. Using that sort of validation could be one significant solution in getting around that particular issue. I hope you find this video useful. If you do, go ahead and give it a like, share it with friends. You can check my work out on Patreon, my website, and follow me on other social media platforms. I definitely love to hear from you. How does this skill work in your practice, weighing the evidence? What approaches have you used? Your own way of pulling this one off that you find that just makes this technique that much greater. I'd really appreciate hearing from you in the comment section. See you in the next one.